The soldier thought the storm outside was the only danger, but when his K9 froze at the basement door, staring, unblinking, refusing to move, he realized the real threat was beneath his own feet. And then he heard the whisper in the dark, "Don't go down there." The storm had started like any other. Rain hammered against the farmhouse roof in relentless sheets, each drop sounding like the tick of a clock counting down to something inevitable. Wind howled through the trees, bending their spines until they creaked and snapped. The world outside had become a blur of gray water and black shadows, but inside the old house, Daniel had found a strange kind of peace. He sat in the hallway, flashlight propped against his knee, Rex, his black Antan German shepherd, stretched out at his feet. The soldier had spent enough nights in battlefields to know that storms, no matter how violent, eventually passed. He thought this would be no different. But then Rex moved. The dog's ears twitched first, then his head lifted sharply, nostrils flaring. He rose with a low growl, his body tense, hackles bristling. Daniel followed his gaze, expecting to see the front door rattling or the windows shaking loose. But Rex wasn't staring at the storm. He was staring at the basement door. Daniel frowned. The door was nothing special, just a narrow wooden frame at the end of the hallway, paint peeling from years of neglect. It hadn't been opened in weeks. No one went down there. "Easy, boy," Daniel whispered, resting a hand on Rex's back. The shepherd didn't relax. His muscles were tight as coiled rope, his body leaning forward as if something were calling him. The soldier's throat tightened. He had learned long ago to trust the dog's instincts over his own. Rex didn't spook easily. If he was staring like that, there was a reason. A gust of wind rattled the shutters, but the sound was swallowed by something else. Something faint. Something that didn't belong. It was a voice. Daniel froze, his pulse quickening. At first, he thought it was the storm whistling through the cracks. But then the words formed, faint and broken, rising from beneath the door. "Don't go down there." His breath caught in his chest. He whipped the flashlight toward the door. Its weak beam illuminated the peeling paint, the rusty knob, the scene where darkness leaked through the cracks. Nothing moved. Yet the words still echoed in his ears. Rex growled louder now, pressing closer to the door, tail stiff, teeth bared. Daniel swallowed hard. He had faced insurgents in foreign deserts, ambushes in jungles, firefights in alleys, but something about that whisper sent ice crawling through his veins. The storm outside was nothing compared to the dread now curling in his stomach. He pushed himself to his feet, the flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. He aimed the beam at the knob. For a moment, he thought he saw it twitch, just a fraction, like someone was testing it from the other side. "Who's down there?" Daniel barked, his soldier's voice cutting through the hallway. Silence. Only the storm answered. But Rex didn't move. His eyes were locked on the seam of the door, his growl steady, low, dangerous. Daniel licked his lips. His training screamed at him to clear the area, secure his home, search the basement. But another part of him, the primal part that whispered from the depths of his bones, begged him to leave it shut. The whisper came again. This time clearer. Sharper. "Don't go down there." Daniel's skin crawled. The words weren't warning him. They were begging him. He reached for the doorknob. Rex snapped his head toward him, barking once, loud and urgent, as if to say don't. The dog's body pressed harder against the door, muscles straining, guarding it. His eyes never left the crack, his chest rumbling like thunder. Daniel hesitated, hand hovering inches from the cold metal. He could feel it radiating against his palm, too cold, unnaturally cold, as though the basement wasn't part of the house at all, but something else. Something older. The soldier drew in a long breath, his heart hammering. He had faced bullets and bombs, but this was different. This was unseen. Unknown. And yet, he couldn't ignore it. Because the whisper didn't stop. It rose again, trembling, broken, a voice filled with something that chilled him deeper than fear. "Please, don't go down there." Rex's bark exploded through the hallway, furious, defiant, daring the voice to try again. The storm outside thundered, lightning flashing through the cracks of the shutters. For an instant, the house was bathed in white light, and Daniel swore he saw shadows moving beneath the basement door. Daniel's hand hovered over the knob, every nerve in his body screaming. His soldier's instinct told him to secure the unknown, to push forward no matter what. But the part of him that still believed in instincts older than guns, the primal part that trusted Rex without question, told him to stay away. The shepherd pressed harder against the door, his growl vibrating through the floorboards. He was warning Daniel, but also holding the line, as if his body alone could keep whatever lay beneath from climbing up. His teeth flashed in the dim light, saliva dripping onto the floor as the growl deepened into a snarl. "Easy, Rex," Daniel whispered, his voice rough, more for himself than the dog. "We'll figure this out." But his words felt hollow. There was nothing easy about this. The whisper came again. "Don't go down there." Daniel's skin prickled. It wasn't the storm, it wasn't imagination, he knew that now. The words were too clear, too deliberate. He strained his ears, listening between the gusts of wind and rumbles of thunder. And then he realized something that froze his blood. The voice didn't echo. Sound in the basement should have carried, bouncing off concrete walls, muffled by the door. But this voice was flat, close, as if the speaker was standing right on the other side of the wood, their lips pressed to the crack. Rex barked suddenly, lunging at the door. His claws raked the wood, splinters flying. The sound of his fury filled the hallway, drowning out the storm for a heartbeat. He wanted it gone. Whatever it was. Daniel's throat tightened. He aimed the flashlight lower, toward the gap between the door and the floorboards. His pulse hammered. For a long moment, he saw nothing, only the strip of darkness. Then something moved. A finger. Pale, thin, pressed flat against the crack. It slid slowly along the gap, scraping wood, leaving a faint trail of dampness behind. Daniel stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. What the hell? Rex went wild. His bark exploded, furious, his body slamming against the door as if to crush the hand beneath it. The pale finger twitched, then slipped back into the darkness. The whisper came again, louder, sharper. "Don't go down there." But this time, Daniel heard something beneath the plea. Something like laughter. His chest tightened. He backed up 2 steps, pulling Rex with him by the collar. The shepherd resisted, body rigid, eyes blazing at the door. The house groaned under the storm, every window rattling, wind howling through the shutters. But none of it drowned out the sound that followed, footsteps. They came from below, slow and deliberate, climbing the basement stairs one by one. Thump. 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 Daniel raised the flashlight higher, his other hand instinctively reaching toward his hip, but there was no rifle here, no sidearm, nothing but a knife on the kitchen counter 10 feet away. He was unarmed, and the thing coming up the stairs knew it. "Back, Rex," he hissed. The shepherd didn't move. He stood square at the door, his growl now a roar, his teeth bared, his stance perfect, a soldier guarding the threshold. The footsteps stopped just behind the door. Silence pressed against the hallway, heavier than the storm, thicker than air. Daniel held his breath. Then, knock. 3 sharp raps against the wood. Knock. 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 The sound echoed like gunfire in the small hallway. Emma's photo frame, his niece, the little girl who used to play in this house, rattled on the wall and fell face down onto the floor. Daniel's heart stopped. "Who's there?" he barked, his soldier's voice cutting through the fear. "Answer me." For a long moment, nothing. Then the whisper again. "Don't go down there." But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was mocking. Daniel's jaw clenched. He couldn't retreat. Not now. His entire life had been about facing the unknown, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. He couldn't let fear win, not with Rex ready to fight at his side. He stepped forward, seized the knob, and twisted hard. The door swung open. The flashlight beam shot down the staircase, illuminating damp concrete walls slick with moisture. The stairs stretched downward into blackness, each step swallowed by shadows. Empty. No figure. No pale hands. Nothing. But the air that rushed out was freezing, colder than winter, laced with the stench of earth and mildew. Daniel's breath fogged in front of him. Rex growled, his paws planted on the top step, his body quivering. His ears pinned forward, his eyes locked on the abyss. He refused to descend, but he refused to back away. Daniel steadied his breathing. "We're going to see this through, boy." The whisper rose again, this time not from below, but from behind his ear. "Don't go down there." Daniel spun, flashlight slashing the walls. Empty. Rex barked, furious, lunging at the stairwell. His claws scraped the first step, teeth bared, eyes blazing. Daniel's pulse hammered. There was no turning back now. Daniel had spent years walking into danger. Desert ambushes, alleys that stank of gunpowder, jungles so dark you couldn't tell if the sound behind you was wind or a trigger being pulled. But nothing had ever felt like this. The open basement door was more than wood and hinges, it was a wound in the house, a mouth yawning into darkness that didn't belong. Cold air rolled up the stairs in steady breaths, carrying with it the stink of damp earth, rusted metal, and something else. Something that smelled like rot. Rex's body was rigid, every hair on his back raised like quills. His growl hadn't stopped, low and constant, vibrating through the hallway floor. He didn't want to go down there. But he also wouldn't let Daniel go alone. Daniel adjusted his flashlight grip, the beam shaking slightly in his hand. "With me," he muttered, his soldier's command voice returning, rough and steady. Rex responded with a sharp bark, then stepped onto the first stair. His claws scraped the wood, echoing far louder than they should have in the stairwell. Daniel followed, boots pressing carefully onto each groaning step. The deeper they went, the colder it grew. By the fourth step, Daniel could see his own breath curling in front of his face. By the sixth, the flashlight beam began to dim, the darkness swallowing it as though the batteries were dying, though he'd replaced them that morning. By the eighth, the whisper returned. "Don't go down there." Daniel froze, his pulse pounding. The voice wasn't behind them now. It wasn't above them. It was below, seeping up through the stairs, curling around his ankles like smoke. Rex snarled, lunging forward, teeth flashing into the dark. His bark exploded, fierce, echoing off the stone walls. The sound seemed to make the whisper retreat for a moment, but it came back stronger, this time in a chorus. Dozens of voices. Male. Female. Child. All murmuring together in a dreadful harmony. "Don't go down there." Daniel's stomach tightened. He gritted his teeth, forcing his legs to move. He had been trained to walk into fire, to face threats no sane man would face. This was no different. He couldn't back down now. The basement floor came into view. Concrete slick with moisture, shadows crawling along the edges. The flashlight caught glimmers, rusted tools on a workbench, a broken chair, a length of chain half buried in the dirt. But the center of the basement was wrong. The light seemed to bend there, refusing to illuminate it fully. A circular patch of darkness clung to the floor like oil. As Daniel and Rex stepped off the last stair, the shadows shifted, not like light playing tricks, but like something alive turning to look at them. Rex barked savagely, lunging forward, his body between Daniel and the circle. His growl became a roar, his teeth bared at the void. The shepherd's stance was absolute: you will not touch him. Daniel steadied his breathing, the soldier in him overriding the terror clawing at his chest. He scanned the room, searching for movement, for anything tangible. "Who's down here?" he shouted, his voice firm, commanding. Silence. Then, faintly, from the shadows, laughter. It was soft at first, like a child giggling. Then it warped, stretching, deepening into something hollow and cruel. The sound slithered around the basement, coming from everywhere at once. Daniel raised the flashlight toward the circle. For a split second, the beam pierced the darkness, and what it revealed made his blood run cold. Hands. Dozens of pale, skeletal hands clawing at the floor, reaching upward as though trying to pull themselves free. They twitched and scraped, leaving long gouges in the concrete. And in the center, half hidden, were faces. Eyes hollow, mouths open in silent screams. Emma's voice, his niece's, whispered from the circle, soft and pleading. "Uncle Daniel, don't go down there." Daniel staggered back, his chest seizing. His mind screamed it's not her, it's not real, but the sound of her voice cut deeper than bullets. Rex snapped, barking furiously, hurling himself at the circle. His claws scraped the concrete, his teeth bared, his body a wall between Daniel and the horror. The shadows recoiled, the voices hissing. Daniel's grip on the flashlight tightened until his knuckles went white. He wanted to run. Every sane instinct screamed at him to bolt back up the stairs, slam the door, and never return. But then he looked at Rex, unwavering, fearless, refusing to abandon him, and he knew he couldn't. If the dog was willing to face it, so was he. Daniel stepped closer to the circle. His voice shook, but he forced it steady. "What are you?" The chorus whispered back, voices overlapping like broken glass. "Hungry." The hands twitched, reaching higher. The circle swelled, shadows stretching toward him. The basement shook, dust raining from the ceiling. Rex barked again, lunging, snapping at the dark tendrils that slithered outward. His jaws closed on nothing, yet each bite made the shadows recoil, hissing like steam. Daniel's heart pounded. He had to choose, retreat or descend into the madness further. And then the whisper came again, softer, closer, right at his ear. "Don't go down there." This time, it wasn't mocking. It was desperate. It sounded like a warning. The basement air pressed against Daniel's chest like a weight. Every breath burned cold in his lungs, and every sound echoed too long, as if the room itself were breathing with him. The storm above raged on, but down here, the chaos of rain and wind seemed distant, muffled, as though the house had sealed them off from the world. Rex had not moved from his position. The shepherd stood rigid at the edge of the circle, teeth flashing, his bark a thunderclap in the cavernous dark. Each time the shadows slithered outward, his body snapped forward, driving them back. His growl filled the room, primal and raw, the kind of sound no human throat could ever make. Daniel's flashlight trembled in his grip. The beam shook across rusted tools, jars of nails, scraps of forgotten junk, then back to the circle where those pale hands twitched against the floor. He wanted to believe his eyes were playing tricks, that the storm's madness had gotten into him. But the gouges in the concrete were real. Fresh. "Uncle Daniel." Emma's voice again. Weak. Pleading. Daniel's throat closed. He had raised that little girl like his own after his brother died overseas. He knew her voice better than he knew his own heartbeat. Hearing it now, rising from this pit of shadows, was like a knife twisting inside him. "It's not her," he muttered, forcing the words out. "It's not her, damn it." But then the voice cracked, broken with fear. "Please, don't leave me down here." Daniel staggered forward a step before catching himself. His boots scuffed the concrete, and the circle rippled like liquid, hands jerking upward, reaching. Rex leapt sideways, slamming his body against Daniel's leg, snapping him out of the trance. The shepherd barked furiously, his eyes wide, tail stiff, fur bristling. He wasn't just warning now. He was begging Daniel not to go closer. The whisper chorus swelled again, louder this time, voices overlapping until they became a storm of their own. "Don't go down there, don't go down there." But the tone had shifted. The words weren't pleading anymore. They were commanding. Insistent. Daniel's pulse hammered. He had been in interrogation rooms overseas where insurgents shouted lies at him until the air was poison. He knew psychological warfare when he heard it. These voices, whatever they were, wanted him confused. They wanted him afraid. He forced his breathing steady, turning his flashlight around the room instead of focusing on the circle. That was when he noticed something he hadn't before. The chains. They weren't just scraps of old metal tossed aside. They were arranged deliberately, coiled around the walls in looping patterns. Some hung from hooks, others half buried in the dirt. Rusted, thick, heavy. Restraints. And near the workbench in the corner lay a wooden chair, its arms scarred with grooves, the deep marks of fingernails clawing against it. Daniel's skin went cold. This basement wasn't just storage. Someone had used it. Someone had held others here. "Rex," he whispered, the name cracking in his throat. The shepherd's growl deepened. His ears flicked toward the far corner of the basement, beyond the circle. Daniel turned the flashlight in that direction, and his stomach dropped. A door. Half hidden behind shelves stacked with rotting boxes, there was another door. Narrow, iron-banded, its edges damp with black mold. He had never seen it before. He had lived in this house for years and had never noticed it, never even thought a second basement could exist. But now it was there. And as the flashlight beam struck it, the chorus of whispers cut off. Silence crashed down heavy and absolute. Daniel's breath quickened. He took one step toward the hidden door. The circle of hands convulsed, twitching violently. A shriek erupted from the pit, high and piercing, so loud it rattled his teeth. Rex barked in fury, lunging toward the shadows, his whole body shaking with the force of his rage. "Don't go down there," the chorus screamed, no longer whispers but a deafening roar. The concrete vibrated beneath their feet. Dust rained from the ceiling, mixing with the cold fog rising from the circle. Daniel staggered but didn't back down. He knew, with the certainty of a soldier staring down an ambush, that whatever was in that second door was the truth. That was what the voices were hiding. Rex turned to him, his bark sharp, his eyes fierce. He wasn't warning anymore. He was ready. Ready to fight whatever waited. Daniel tightened his grip on the flashlight, his jaw set. His fear was still there, screaming in the back of his mind, but it no longer controlled him. "All right, boy," he muttered, his voice grim. "We go together." He stepped around the circle, boots scraping the concrete. The hands clawed upward, straining to reach him, but Rex lunged at them, snapping his teeth, forcing them back. The shepherd's fury carved a path. Together, they reached the hidden door. The iron was ice-cold to the touch, colder even than the basement air. Daniel's fingers ached as they wrapped around the rusted handle. For a moment, he hesitated, his mind filled with the storm above, the house he might never see again, the niece whose voice still echoed in his ears. Then he pulled. The hinges shrieked, a sound that made his bones vibrate. The door cracked open, darkness spilling out like smoke. And from beyond, something moved. The iron-banded door groaned as Daniel pulled it wider. Rust flaked off in jagged chunks, scattering across the concrete. The darkness beyond it was thick, thicker than shadow, thicker than the storm outside. It wasn't the absence of light, it felt like something alive, pressing outward, eager to spill into the basement. Rex barked furiously, snapping his teeth at the crack as if he could bite the darkness itself. His body trembled but he didn't back down. Every inch of him screamed protectiveness, his hackles raised, his stance firm. Daniel raised the flashlight, the beam trembling in his grasp. For a moment, the light refused to enter the room. It bent, warped, dimmed at the threshold as though something resisted it. But then the beam cut through, and what it revealed made Daniel's stomach lurch. Stairs. Another staircase, narrower than the first, carved directly into the earth. The walls were rough stone, slick with moisture, dripping steadily into puddles below. The steps descended into a cavern that looked endless. Daniel's mind spun. He had lived in this farmhouse for years, and yet there had been no sign, no blueprint, no hint of a second basement carved beneath the first. Someone had built this in secret. And for what? Rex whined sharply, his nose twitching, his body tense. He pawed at the threshold once, then backed up half a step, his eyes locked on the stairs. He didn't want to go in, but he wouldn't let Daniel go alone either. The air that rushed out was worse than the cold. It carried a smell so foul Daniel gagged behind clenched teeth, damp earth mixed with iron, and beneath it all, the unmistakable stench of decay. His chest tightened. He knew that smell. He had smelled it in war zones, in villages after firefights, in alleys where bodies had been left too long. Death. The chorus of whispers surged again, filling the basement like a tide. Don't go down there. But this time, there was urgency, not mocking, not commanding, but desperate. A warning. Rex snarled in reply, barking into the stairwell, daring the voices to come closer. Daniel clenched his jaw. His whole body told him to close the door and run, to flee the house and never return. But the soldier in him, the part that had faced death and refused to flinch, forced his boots forward. He placed one foot on the first stone step. The basement reacted. The shadows in the circle writhed violently, the skeletal hands clawing higher, scraping furrows in the concrete. A shriek rose from them, high and inhuman, rattling the jars on the shelves. Dust poured from the ceiling, the chains clinking against the walls as if stirred by unseen hands. Rex howled, lunging forward to press against Daniel's leg, urging him on, guarding him at once. His teeth bared at every movement of shadow, every hiss that slithered through the dark. Daniel descended another step. His flashlight beam flickered as though trying to die. The whispers shifted, changing tone. They no longer repeated the same words. They formed sentences. You shouldn't be here. They will take you. You belong with us. The voices overlapped, rising and falling, a choir of dread. Daniel gritted his teeth, forcing his breathing steady. Shut up, he muttered. Show yourself. The flashlight beam quivered down the staircase, and froze. At the bottom, something stood. A figure. It was tall, impossibly tall, its head nearly brushing the low ceiling. Its skin was gray, stretched tight over long limbs, its fingers dragging against the walls, leaving black streaks. Its eyes glowed faintly, pale and hollow, like dying embers. Rex's bark exploded, a roar of fury that filled the stairwell. He lunged forward, only held back by Daniel's hand gripping his collar. The shepherd's muscles surged, every part of him ready to attack, to tear the thing apart if it dared climb. The figure tilted its head, those pale eyes locking onto them. When it spoke, its voice wasn't one but many, the entire chorus of whispers speaking as one. Don't go down there. Daniel's blood ran cold. This was the thing that had been speaking all along. But now its words were hollow, as though mocking the very warning it gave. The figure stepped forward. Its fingers curled around the stair rail, long and skeletal, scraping grooves into the wood. Rex lunged, his bark deafening, saliva flying from his teeth. He pulled against Daniel's grip, desperate to strike first. Daniel raised the flashlight higher, his other hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. He felt naked without a rifle, exposed without steel. But he had something stronger beside him, Rex. the thing took another step. The air grew colder still, freezing Daniel's breath in front of him. The shadows behind it writhed, stretching upward like tendrils, reaching toward the stairwell. The shepherd barked again, louder, more savage. His entire body shook with defiance. And Daniel realized something: the thing hadn't crossed the threshold. It stood at the bottom of the stairs, but it didn't rise. It couldn't. Whatever it was bound below. The chains on the walls rattled violently, as though in agreement. The room itself shook, dust raining down. The circle of hands shrieked again, clawing madly at the concrete floor. The figure's hollow eyes flicked to Rex, and for the first time, its smile stretched. A wide, terrible smile. "You can't keep him," it whispered. "The dog will go down, when you fail." Daniel's grip on Rex tightened. His jaw clenched. "Over my dead body." The figure tilted its head further, its grin widening. "Yes." The lights flickered. The flashlight dimmed. The shadows surged higher. And the basement door slammed shut behind them. The slam of the basement door echoed like a gunshot. Daniel spun, flashlight beam jerking wildly across the concrete walls. The door at the top of the staircase had sealed itself shut, the rusted hinges groaning one last time before silence fell. No draft, no crack of light from above, just the sound of chains rattling faintly and the storm muffled into nothing. They were trapped. Rex barked savagely, his voice reverberating through the narrow stairwell. He lunged against Daniel's hold, claws scraping at the steps, teeth bared at the figure below. The shepherd's fury was unrelenting, a wall of sound and muscle refusing to yield. The figure at the bottom didn't flinch. It simply stood, tall and skeletal, its grin stretched impossibly wide. Its pale eyes glowed faintly, washing the air in cold light. Shadows writhed at its feet like a nest of snakes, curling and recoiling with each flicker of Daniel's flashlight. "You shouldn't have opened the door," the voices said, not one, not two, but hundreds, layered and broken, like an army whispering into his ear. "Now it won't close again." Daniel's jaw clenched. He fought to steady his breathing, forcing the soldier in him to push past the terror clawing at his gut. He had been cornered before, in alleys, in trenches, with no way out but forward. He knew what had to be done. But Rex's instincts were stronger. The shepherd lunged, pulling Daniel 2 steps closer to the abyss. His teeth snapped at the darkness, his growl transforming into a roar so deep it vibrated Daniel's ribs. "Easy, boy." Daniel barked, bracing himself. "Not yet." The figure's grin widened further, splitting its face unnaturally. Its head tilted, the crack of bone echoing through the stairwell. "You think the dog protects you," it whispered, "but he is the door. Through him, I come." Daniel froze, the words slamming into him like a blow. He looked at Rex, trembling, growling, fighting to hold back the tide, and realized the thing wasn't just speaking nonsense. It wanted Rex. The shepherd barked furiously, as if he understood, as if he was daring the entity to try. Daniel snarled, his voice low and steady. "You're not taking him." The figure stepped forward. One long, skeletal foot pressed against the first stone stair. The air dropped to freezing, Daniel's breath misting in the beam of his flashlight. Rex lunged harder, pulling Daniel down another step. The shepherd's body shook with raw defiance, his bark cutting through the unnatural chorus. But the shadows surged upward in reply, tendrils of darkness slithering across the stairs like grasping hands. Daniel swung the flashlight beam across them. The shadows recoiled, hissing, but only for a moment. Then they pressed forward again, clawing toward his boots, reaching for Rex's legs. The shepherd snapped, his jaws closing on one of the tendrils. For a heartbeat, it was like he bit into smoke. Then the thing shrieked. A sound so sharp and violent it made Daniel's teeth ache. The shadows writhed, retreating for just a second, enough for Daniel to yank Rex back 2 steps. "You heard it," Daniel muttered, realization flooding his chest. "You can fight it." The entity tilted its head, its grin fading into something darker. Its eyes burned brighter, and its many voices spoke in unison. "The dog will tire. The man will break. And when he does, the door will open wider." The basement shook. Dust rained from the ceiling, chains rattling on the walls. The circle of skeletal hands in the main room clawed wildly, shrieking in chorus. Daniel's flashlight flickered. He smacked it against his palm, forcing the beam steady. He couldn't afford to lose light now. Light was the only thing keeping the shadows from swallowing them whole. "Rex, with me," he barked, soldier's tone sharp and commanding. The shepherd obeyed instantly, his body pressed against Daniel's leg, growl still rumbling deep in his chest. His eyes never left the figure below, but he matched Daniel's stance, waiting for the order. Step by step, Daniel forced himself down the stairs. The air grew colder, the whispers louder. The figure didn't retreat. It waited, its long arms stretched wide, fingers dragging along the walls, leaving black streaks that pulsed like veins. Every instinct screamed at Daniel to turn back, to run, to claw at the door upstairs until his nails bled. But he pushed forward. Not because he wanted to, but because Rex did. The dog was ready to fight, ready to protect, and Daniel knew he couldn't abandon him. Halfway down, the shadows surged again. Tendrils lashed upward, wrapping around the stair rail, curling toward Daniel's boots. He kicked one aside, the impact sending a shiver through his leg as though he had struck ice. Rex leapt, jaws snapping, tearing through another tendril. The shadow shrieked again, recoiling in pain. For every strike the shepherd made, the darkness thinned, but only briefly. Each tendril he destroyed seemed to birth 2 more, writhing upward with renewed fury. The figure's voice swelled, drowning the storm above. "He will break. He will bleed. He will come down." Daniel's grip tightened on the flashlight until his knuckles went white. His heart hammered, but his voice was steady when he answered. "Over. My dead body." The figure smiled again, a hollow grin stretching across its face. "Yes," it whispered. "That is how it ends." The floor shook. The walls groaned. And suddenly, the stair beneath Daniel's boot cracked. He lurched, stumbling, his flashlight beam slicing wildly. The stone step shattered, crumbling into the abyss. Daniel clung to the railing with one hand, his other arm yanking Rex back before the shepherd could tumble with him. The shadows surged upward, clawing at the broken gap, writhing like worms from a wound. Rex barked savagely, snapping at them, his body pressed hard against Daniel's leg, refusing to let him fall. For the first time, Daniel realized how thin the line was between survival and surrender. One slip, one mistake, and they would both be gone. He hauled himself up onto the next step, sweat and rain mixing on his skin, his chest heaving. The flashlight beam steadied again, catching the figure below. Its grin hadn't faltered. Its eyes glowed brighter. The voices swelled, echoing through the stone. "Don't go down there. Don't go down there. Don't go down there." Daniel raised the flashlight higher, his jaw set. Rex barked, his fury unrelenting. Together, man and dog stood against the abyss. But deep down, Daniel knew, the thing wasn't warning them anymore. It was mocking them. Daring them. And the real horror was still waiting below. The stairwell shuddered as though the mountain itself wanted to spit them out. Dust rained from the ceiling in gritty streams, coating Daniel's tongue with earth and iron. The storm outside was a distant murmur now, the real storm was here, coiling in the shadows that clung to every stone. Rex snarled at the darkness, his teeth bared, body braced against Daniel's leg like an immovable wall. Every hair along his back stood up, his hackles so high they made him look twice his size. His growls rumbled low, primal, ancient, the kind of sound that made even the abyss hesitate. But hesitation didn't last. The shadows lunged. Dozens of tendrils shot upward at once, writhing and snapping like serpents made of smoke and tar. They wrapped around the stair rail, the walls, even the ceiling, pulling themselves closer, clawing toward Daniel and his dog. "Hold!" Daniel barked, instinct taking over, his soldier's command voice cutting through the chaos. Rex obeyed, but only long enough for the shadows to get close. Then he exploded into motion, lunging forward, jaws clamping down on one tendril. His teeth sank in, and the darkness screamed, not with sound, but with vibration, a shudder that shook the entire stairwell. Daniel staggered as the stone beneath his boots trembled. He raised the flashlight, blasting the beam directly at the writhing shadow mass. For a moment, the tendrils recoiled, burning away at the edges where the light struck. But the beam flickered again, stuttering weakly as though the darkness were drinking it. "Stay with me, boy!" Daniel shouted, shaking the flashlight until it flared again. The figure at the bottom of the stairs didn't move. It simply watched, its grin stretched, its glowing eyes locked on Rex. The voices poured from it in a chorus, louder now, layered, mocking. "The dog tires. The man breaks. You will both go down." Rex barked furiously, dragging one tendril sideways and thrashing it like prey. Another lashed out, striking him across the flank. He yelped but didn't release. His jaws only tightened, his body shaking with the effort of tearing the thing apart. Daniel's gut twisted. He lunged, kicking one shadow aside, then stomping on another as it curled toward Rex's paws. The impact felt like ice splintering up his leg, but the tendril recoiled, shrieking as though it could feel pain. "Good boy, fight it!" Daniel roared. His voice wasn't just for Rex, it was for himself, to drown out the whispers that clawed at his mind. Because the voices had changed. Now they weren't just echoing from the figure below. They were inside his head. "Daniel, let go. You can't protect him forever. He will fall, and you will follow." He clenched his jaw, shaking his head violently, forcing the thoughts out. But the whispers clawed deeper, burrowing into the cracks of his resolve. For a moment, his grip on the flashlight loosened. Then Rex barked. Loud. Fierce. A sound that ripped through Daniel's skull like a gunshot, clearing the fog. Daniel's eyes snapped back into focus. His dog wasn't just fighting the shadows, he was fighting for him. For both of them. With a savage snarl, Rex tore through the tendril in his jaws. It disintegrated in a burst of smoke that reeked of ash and iron. But the victory was brief. Two more shot upward, wrapping around his hind legs. The shepherd twisted, snapping at them, but they pulled tight, dragging him toward the broken stair. "Rex!" Daniel lunged, dropping to his knees. He seized the dog's collar with one hand and swung the flashlight with the other, blasting the beam onto the tendrils. They hissed, recoiling enough for Rex to rip free. The shepherd bolted back to Daniel's side, chest heaving, saliva dripping from his bared teeth. His eyes burned, locked on the figure below. He wasn't afraid. He was furious. Daniel wiped sweat and dust from his forehead, his heart pounding so hard it shook his ribs. "We're not going down," he spat into the darkness. The figure tilted its head, its grin fading into something colder. "You already have." The walls groaned. Chains rattled violently, snapping against hooks as though invisible hands pulled them. The circle of skeletal hands in the upper basement shrieked in unison, the sound cutting through stone like a blade. The stair beneath Daniel's knees cracked again, a fissure racing across its surface. He hauled Rex back, retreating 2 steps higher. His flashlight beam swept over the figure just as it lifted one long arm upward. Its fingers stretched, impossibly long, curling toward them like claws. Rex growled so violently his whole body vibrated. His hackles rose higher, his bark erupting into the stairwell with such force it drowned even the whispers. He lunged forward, his teeth snapping just short of the shadowy claw, daring it to try again. The figure froze. For the first time, its grin faltered. Daniel's chest heaved. He realized what was happening. The entity wasn't invincible. It was bound. Bound to the lower chamber. Bound by the chains, by the circle, by whatever had kept it hidden for so long. It could reach. It could whisper. It could lash out. But it couldn't leave. Not fully. And Rex knew it. The shepherd barked again, sharp and commanding, his body vibrating with defiance. The shadows recoiled, shivering back into the abyss. The figure's pale eyes dimmed slightly, its head tilting as though studying the dog with something new. Not hunger. Not mockery. Fear. Daniel seized the moment. He steadied the flashlight beam, planting his boots firm against the stone. "You hear me?" he shouted, his voice booming in the narrow stairwell. "You don't take him. You don't take either of us. We're not going down there. Not tonight. Not ever." The figure's grin returned, but weaker now, strained at the edges. Its voices whispered, softer, "You can't hold the door forever." Rex snarled in reply, a sound so deep and primal it didn't sound like a dog anymore. It sounded like something older, something that had guarded humanity long before rifles and flashlights. The shadows retreated another step. Daniel exhaled, his body trembling with adrenaline. For the first time since opening the basement door, he felt like they weren't prey. They were fighting back. But deep down, he knew the battle wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The entity wasn't beaten. It was waiting. Watching. And the question wasn't whether they could escape tonight. It was how long they could keep the door shut. Daniel's hands were slick with sweat despite the freezing air. His grip on the flashlight felt weak, like the weight of it might slip any second. He adjusted, forcing his knuckles tighter, forcing his mind to focus. The soldier in him had fought chaos before, but this chaos wasn't made of men and rifles. It was older, darker, something that bent rules he had always trusted. Rex didn't flinch. The shepherd stood at the broken stair, growling into the abyss. His body trembled, not with fear but with defiance. Every bark he hurled into the dark was a declaration: "You will not pass. You will not touch him." The entity at the bottom tilted its head, those pale ember eyes flickering. Its grin spread again, crooked and endless. "You think you can leave," the voices said, hundreds at once, overlapping. "But the door is open. And when the door is open, it does not close." Daniel's jaw clenched. He aimed the flashlight directly at its chest, the beam shaking but steady enough. The thing's shadows hissed, writhing back an inch. "We will leave," Daniel growled. "And you're staying where you belong." The figure didn't move. But the voices changed. They shifted in tone, softer, closer. "Danny." Daniel froze. His lungs stopped working. The voice wasn't Emma's this time. It wasn't the layered chorus. It was his brother's. The brother he'd buried after the war. "Danny, it's me," the voice whispered, trembling with pain. "You left me behind. But I'm here. Down here. Help me." Daniel's chest tightened. His vision blurred. For a moment, he was back in the desert, his brother lying in the sand, blood soaking through his uniform, begging Daniel not to let go. He'd held his hand until the light left his eyes. And now that voice, that same voice, echoed up the stone stairwell. His knees buckled. The flashlight beam dropped, sliding across the wall. "No, no, it's not real." Rex barked sharply, snapping him out of the trance. The shepherd lunged sideways, shoving his body against Daniel's leg, growling so hard the air shook. He was grounding him. reminding him. But the voices didn't stop. Uncle Daniel, Emma's voice again, weak, pleading. "Danny, don't leave me," his brother's voice, full of grief. Then others, voices of men he'd lost in battle, men he'd carried home in bags. One after another, flooding the stairwell with guilt and sorrow. Daniel clutched his head with one hand, flashlight beam jerking wildly. His breath came ragged, sweat and tears mixing. The weight of every ghost he'd ever carried pressed against him, trying to drag him down. The figure's grin widened. The shadows surged higher, tendrils curling like fingers around the railing, the steps, reaching. Rex snapped. His bark exploded, feral and relentless. He hurled himself forward, jaws clamping onto one tendril. His teeth ripped through the shadow, tearing it into smoke. Another lashed at him, striking across his flank. He yelped but didn't retreat. He pressed harder, snarling, dragging the tendril backward like prey. Daniel forced himself upright. He grabbed the shepherd's collar, steadying both of them. His voice came raw, broken but firm. "None of it's real, boy. It's not them. It's not her. It's not him." The voices shrieked in unison, furious, their tone twisting. "It is real. We are real. And soon, so will you." The stairwell shook violently. Stone cracked. Dust poured in sheets. Daniel's flashlight flickered again, the beam sputtering. He smacked it desperately, forcing the light steady. "We need to move," he gasped. His soldier's instincts screamed, "Escape." Retreat wasn't cowardice, it was survival. He turned, yanking Rex toward the stairs above. But the basement door was still shut, sealed tight. No light seeped through its cracks. Rex barked at it, leaping, claws scratching against the wood. His body twisted, frantic. He knew that was the way out. Daniel threw his shoulder against the door. Once. Twice. The wood groaned but held. The iron latch rattled from the other side, as if unseen hands pressed it closed. The voices laughed, a sound that curdled the air. No doors. No windows. Only down. Always down. The stair beneath them cracked again. A fissure raced across the stone, splitting it in half. Daniel staggered, grabbing the rail. The flashlight slipped, clattering down 2 steps, its beam spinning wildly across the walls. In that split second of chaos, something surged upward. A tendril, thicker than the others, slammed into Daniel's chest. It wasn't smoke this time, it was solid, cold as iron. The impact knocked him backward, slamming him against the wall. His lungs seized, the air ripped from his chest. Rex launched himself forward with a roar. His teeth sank into the tendril, tearing it away from Daniel. The shepherd thrashed violently, dragging the thing back down the stairs. The shadows screamed, the sound sharp enough to split stone. Daniel gasped, clutching his chest, his vision swimming. He forced his legs to work, diving for the flashlight. His fingers closed around it, jerking it upright. He aimed the beam at the tendril just as Rex ripped through it. The light seared it away, dissolving it into smoke. The shepherd staggered back, chest heaving, his fur matted with blood. But his eyes still burned. He barked once, sharp and furious, daring the shadows to try again. Daniel's throat tightened. He knelt, pulling Rex close, pressing his forehead to the dog's soaked fur. "You're not going down, boy. Not you. Not tonight." The entity below stirred. Its head tilted, its grin stretching wider than ever. Its voice boomed through the stairwell, rattling the stone. "The dog will go down first. And when he does, you'll follow." Daniel's jaw clenched, rage cutting through the fear. He stood, flashlight raised, his voice breaking with fury. "You're not taking him. Not while I breathe." Rex barked in perfect harmony, his roar echoing Daniel's defiance. The stairwell trembled again. Cracks raced higher. The entire house groaned above, as if the storm and the entity were tearing it apart together. Daniel pulled Rex close, teeth gritted. "We're getting out, boy. Even if I have to tear this door off with my bare hands." The voices hissed, swirling, mocking. No escape. Only down. But Rex barked again, louder than the storm, louder than the whispers, louder than death itself. And in that moment, Daniel believed him. They weren't going down. Not yet. The stairwell groaned like it was alive, every stone shuddering with the weight of something older than the house itself. The storm above had nearly vanished from Daniel's ears. All he could hear now were the whispers and the rattling of chains. Rex stood rigid against the basement door, claws gouging into the wood as he barked savagely. His body shook with every roar, spittle flying from his jaws, his entire being focused on one purpose: break through or die trying. Daniel slammed his shoulder into the door again. The iron latch rattled, but the frame held fast, locked tight by unseen hands. His muscles screamed, his chest ached where the tendril had struck him, but he didn't stop. Again. And again. Each impact rattled the wood but didn't break it. Behind them, the figure stepped higher. Its long, skeletal limbs curled around the walls, dragging its body up the stairwell. The pale glow of its eyes lit the stone in ghastly flashes, shadows rippling outward like waves of tar. Its voice was no longer whispers, it was thunder. "You cannot leave. You belong below." Rex whirled, snarling, and launched himself halfway down the steps. His jaws snapped at the reaching tendrils, ripping one to smoke before another lashed across his side. He yelped, twisting, but still fought, his teeth tearing again and again. "Rex! Back!" Daniel shouted, panic tearing through his chest. But the shepherd ignored him. He was buying time, holding the line, just like he had on patrols when enemy fire broke through. He wasn't just a dog now. He was a soldier. Daniel dropped the flashlight between his teeth and drew the knife from his belt, a simple combat blade he'd kept since deployment. He jammed it into the doorframe, prying at the iron latch. The metal screamed, sparks flying. The figure laughed, a sound that bent the air. "Break the wood. Break your bones. It doesn't matter. Down is forever." The stairwell shook violently. Another fissure cracked across the stone, chunks of rock tumbling into the abyss below. The railing snapped, plunging into the shadows. Rex barked wildly, biting into another tendril. The shadow shrieked, pulling back, but more replaced it, crawling higher, reaching for Daniel's legs. He kicked one aside, his boot freezing from the impact. "Hold, Rex!" Daniel bellowed through clenched teeth, still wrenching at the latch with the knife. The wood splintered. The metal screamed. "Almost. Almost." The whispers surged again, flooding his skull. This time, they weren't mocking. They were pleading. "Daniel, don't leave us. Don't shut the door. Stay down here. Stay with us forever." Emma's voice cut through, breaking him. "Uncle Daniel, don't let go." His chest seized, the knife nearly slipping. For a heartbeat, he faltered. The grief, the guilt, the loss of everyone he had ever failed, it pressed like chains on his shoulders. Then Rex barked. The shepherd's roar slammed the voices back. His growl was thunder, his bite lightning. He ripped another tendril apart, his eyes blazing with a light that wasn't just fury, it was love. Loyalty. The unspoken oath of a dog who would never let go. Daniel snapped out of the fog. He jammed the knife deeper, levering harder. With a deafening crack, the latch broke. The door flew open. Light. Not sunlight, not yet, but the pale gray of storm clouds, the flicker of lightning. The world above. Go! Daniel roared, ripping Rex's collar. The shepherd didn't hesitate. He bolted upward, dragging Daniel with him. The shadows shrieked in fury, tendrils lashing wildly, slamming against the walls and ceiling. One wrapped around Daniel's boot, yanking him backward. He fell, his grip on Rex the only thing keeping him from tumbling down. Rex! The shepherd lunged, teeth clamping onto his jacket sleeve. He pulled with everything in him, his muscles straining, claws digging into the wooden steps. Daniel's body lifted, inch by inch, the tendril stretching taut. Daniel swung the flashlight beam downward. The light struck the tendril. It writhed, hissing, and dissolved into smoke. He scrambled to his feet, sprinting with Rex up the last steps. The figure roared below, its many voices crashing into one. The door is open. It will never close. Daniel and Rex burst into the hallway. Rain hammered against the shutters, wind howled through broken glass. The house shuddered as if it, too, wanted to collapse. Daniel slammed the basement door shut, shoving the broken latch back into place. He dragged an old oak cabinet against it, then another. Rex pressed his body against the wood, growling, his teeth still bared. The whispers bled through, muffled but relentless. "Don't go down there." Daniel collapsed against the wall, gasping, the flashlight flickering in his trembling hand. His chest burned, his body ached, but his eyes found Rex. The shepherd stood firm at the door, his body blocking it, his eyes never leaving the wood. His chest heaved, his fur streaked with blood, but his stance was unyielding. He would not move. Daniel reached out, his hand gripping the dog's soaked fur. His voice was hoarse, broken, but steady. "We're not going down. Not tonight. Not ever." Rex growled low, his promise echoing through the storm. The rain had finally slowed to a drizzle, the ferocious storm now a memory etched into the house's battered walls. The wind still whispered through the shattered windows, carrying with it the scent of wet earth, damp wood, and the lingering tension of the night. Daniel sank onto the soaked floorboards, his clothes torn, his hands scraped and bleeding, and his chest heaving with each desperate breath. But he wasn't alone. Rex, standing guard at the basement door, lowered his growl slightly as he turned to nuzzle Daniel's shoulder. His dark eyes, still glinting with alertness, reflected unwavering devotion. For a long moment, neither moved. They just listened to the soft patter of rain and the occasional creak of the old house settling after the storm's rage. The shadows had receded, leaving only the faint remnants of their presence in the form of scratches on the walls and a chilling silence that reminded Daniel of how close they had come to being pulled under. "Rex, you kept me alive," Daniel whispered hoarsely, voice cracking under the weight of exhaustion. He ran a hand through the wet fur along the dog's neck, feeling the tense muscles gradually relax beneath his touch. Rex pressed closer, letting out a soft, almost contented sigh. There was no need for words. The bond between them had transcended the ordinary, tonight had forged something unbreakable. Daniel rose slowly, testing his limbs. Every joint ached, every muscle screamed, but he ignored the pain. He had survived, and that was all that mattered. He glanced around the hallway, noticing the debris scattered across the floor, a broken chair, splintered railing, fragments of the basement door, and small puddles from the storm's relentless assault. The house bore the scars of the night's terror, yet it still stood, stubbornly defiant, much like Rex himself. Cautiously, Daniel approached the basement door, still wary of what might be lurking beneath. He ran his hand over the old wood, now damp and swollen from rain. The chains rattled faintly as though protesting their enforced imprisonment, but the shadows never returned. Whatever had emerged from the depths seemed to have been held back, defeated by Rex's vigilance and Daniel's sheer determination. He leaned down, face close to Rex's, and whispered, "We did it, we really did it." The dog wagged his tail faintly, then padded over to the staircase that led upstairs. Daniel followed, ascending slowly, each step creaking ominously under his weight. As he reached the top floor, the faint morning light filtered through broken shutters, casting long, angled beams across the room. Dust and rain-mixed debris floated lazily in the air, illuminated by the sun's first rays, giving the chaos a surreal, almost dreamlike quality. Daniel looked outside. The world beyond the house had transformed overnight. The storm had left the landscape drenched, the river swollen but receding. Trees had been torn from the ground, branches strewn like discarded toys, and puddles mirrored the dim, early sky. It was a world battered and bruised, but alive, just like him and Rex. His attention shifted to the living room, where Emma's favorite blanket had been blown onto the couch, wet but intact. Daniel sighed, relief washing over him. Somehow, amidst the storm and darkness, he had preserved the fragments of life he loved. And Rex? Rex had made sure none of it was lost. For hours, Daniel worked quietly, cleaning the floors, setting right what had been broken, and placing furniture back into positions that made the space feel like home again. Rex moved beside him, ever watchful, occasionally barking at the distant drip of water or a gust of wind. Every once in a while, he'd look at Daniel with a gaze that seemed to say, "I'll always be here, no matter what." By late afternoon, the storm had fully passed. The sun peeked bravely through the clouds, illuminating the yard in a soft, golden light. Daniel finally allowed himself to sit, back against the living room wall, Rex lying at his feet with his head resting on Daniel's boots. The warmth of the sun mixed with the lingering chill in the air, creating a strange but comforting balance, a calm after the chaos, a silence that was not empty, but filled with the steady rhythm of survival. Daniel thought back to the basement, to the figure with its skeletal limbs and glowing eyes. He shivered but forced himself to breathe. Whatever it had been defeated tonight, held back by courage, loyalty, and a refusal to give in. And yet, a small part of him knew it wasn't gone forever. The shadows were patient, and the storm was only one night. But as long as Rex was by his side, he felt ready for whatever might come next. He reached down and scratched behind Rex's ears, feeling the dog's fur rise under his fingers. "You saved me, buddy. I owe you my life." Rex responded with a gentle lick, eyes closing in contentment. No words were needed. They had shared a trial by fire, and both had emerged stronger, closer, unshakable. The sun climbed higher, drying the rain-soaked world, illuminating the debris, and casting sharp shadows across the walls. Daniel stood, surveying the damage, and then his gaze fell on the basement door. It was solid now, barricaded, and he felt the tension in his chest ease. For now, the threat was gone. And yet, he knew he'd never forget the night, the terror, or the way Rex had stared down the darkness with unwavering courage. A soft breeze carried the scent of wet earth and fresh growth through the open windows, and Daniel allowed himself a rare smile. "Let's get some rest, Rex. Tomorrow, we rebuild. Together." Rex's tail wagged in agreement, and he padded over to Daniel, nudging his hand, ready for whatever lay ahead. Together, they stood at the threshold of survival, watching the storm-drenched world slowly heal, knowing that as long as they had each other, nothing, neither darkness nor shadows, could ever truly break them. And as Daniel looked at the basement door one last time, he could swear he heard a faint whisper, carried on the breeze, "We'll be waiting, but not tonight." He ignored it. Rex barked softly, a reminder that they had survived. And that was enough. For now. Visual prompt, Block 10. A soldier stands in a sunlit, rain-drenched living room, surrounded by broken furniture and debris. His German shepherd lies loyally at his feet, tail wagging gently. Sunlight streams through broken shutters, illuminating the calm after a violent storm. The soldier looks out at the yard, exhausted but relieved, while in the distance, a shadowy basement door is firmly barricaded. The atmosphere conveys survival, loyalty, and triumph after near-certain loss.